Mention the word Tantra, and more than likely the first thing that comes to mind is sex, spicing things up in the bedroom, and positions that you would need to be a yoga guru to accomplish successfully. However, tantric teachings are a much wider means of allowing us to become aware of, cultivate, and allow the flow of our life force energy. So says Mark Sutton, who teaches Tantra. So let's get ready for your first lesson. Mark, you're very welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, Gerry.
Hey, Sting has a lot to answer for, because when we mentioned Tantra in the office this morning, that was the first thing people said. We'll be tuned at 1:30 to hear what he has to say.
Well, yeah, that's true. There's a lot of truth in that he has a lot to answer for. But also, there's a lot of truth in the fact that a lot of people got into Tantra by hearing about Sting in the first place. I did. That's where I found my first experience of Tantra, about the age of 30, was hearing this idea here that Sting can have these wonderful 8 hours of sex. And of course, as a man with his testosterone wired in, I'm thinking, wow, 8 hours of sex. So I began to actually explore that, and suddenly found out it was a hell of a lot more than just the guru positions and constantly just going at it for 8 hours.
So what is Tantra?
Well, Tantra itself is best described as a life path of being embodied. It's about, the classical Tantra is about 5,000 years old. And it was initially a way of attaining, it came from India, and it's initially a way of attaining what's called moksha, or liberation, but doing so by fully experiencing life in all its fullest. And that meant not renouncing anything, not becoming celibate, but by simply experiencing everything that the world and the day-to-day actually has to offer. And so Tantra is this whole philosophy about fully experiencing life, about being present in your body, because it believes that the notional idea of separation is what causes a lot of ills and lots of the pains in the world. And then, it developed on from 5,000 years of age, and it stayed down there in India. Then it vanished a little bit. Then it came forward and popped up in other parts of the world. And it came out through Tibet when, after the Chinese invaded Tibet, it began to be moved through Buddhist Tantra into the West. And then it began to blip on the Western radar back in round about 1989 with the publication of a book by Margot Anand called The Art of Sexual Ecstasy. And she began to adapt what Tantra for her, from her teacher Osho, for the Western mind. And more rightly, that's what's known as Neo-Tantra or New Tantra. And that's more concerned with the spiritual aspects of it, but a lot more about body connection, a lot more about therapeutic exercise, about experiencing bliss and connection in sex with your partner. And more digestible to the Western mind, if you like.
What are the benefits?
Oh, well, now, I mean, say, if we actually have to look at how we view sex and sexuality in the Western world, we have lots of mixed messages. It's almost schizophrenic in the way we view sex. On the one hand, you can sell cars. On the other hand, you're selling cleaning products. And then, again, we're told that there's so much judgment around sex, that we shouldn't be enjoying it, that perhaps we cannot fully immerse into it. And that is best perhaps exemplified by some of the terminology we use. And if I ask you listeners to think about, look at the slang words we use for our genitals, how many of those are actually used in a positive context? The Victorians, and this is one of my favourite quotes, the Victorians have a word for the vulva, which is pudenda. And the direct translation of that is shameful thing.
So that negative connotation was nurtured by the Victorians. It was, compartmentalised, not to be out in the open, to be set aside. And yet, on the other hand, you make the point that sex sells. That's,
Yes, there is a dichotomy.
And that still exists. You're saying that still is there today.
It still is there. There's a move. Well, I mean, say, we can do a whole programme on the advent of internet porn and teenagers, but there's still the idea that sex is out there in a specific context, and that's the way we're looking at it. And that's the way, when people hear about Sting, to relate it back, that's why they see sex, because that's where our focus is. But Tantra is about a path of healing. It is allowing us to connect to the flow of our universal energy. It's allowing us to move that energy through our body, and in doing so, remove a lot of the illnesses based on the work of Wilhelm Reich that actually we suffer from when we have this free flow of energy.
But sex is a central part of it.
Our sexuality is a central
Rather than
part
sex.
of it. Rather than sex, yeah. It's using our sexual energy. Our sexual energy is necessarily separated from the act of sex itself. In lovemaking, we can generate a lot of sexual energy. We can also generate a lot of sexual energy just by visualizing it and imagining it. In fact, if you look at somebody across a bar and you go, wow, and there's a little tingle at the base of the spine, that is our sexual energy. So it's something we can cultivate. It's something we can bring forward and move from parts of our body. And I don't want to go into the Vedic system in too much detail, through our body to connect to our higher selves, to connect to spirituality. So it's a spiritual path.
So it's a holistic.
It's a holistic approach to life, Gerry. That's absolutely true.
Is it difficult to learn? Because I mentioned there you'd need to be a yoga guru. Is that a misconception?
It is. I mean, it's technique based. I mean, Osho actually translated Tantra as meaning method, and I'm an ex-scientist. I was into science for 27 years. So the idea that it's method really does appeal to me from my geeky scientific bent. But it's also known as weaving. It's a Sanskrit term. It means weaving, which is that it goes through the weft of life. So it's a natural way of being. We've just forgotten it. We've already know what it is. And, weekend workshop, you can re-experience it.
You teach this?
I teach this.
And a weekend, you mentioned a weekend workshop. Yeah. Is a weekend enough? Will a weekend set you on your way?
It will most definitely set you on the way. The techniques, whether you want to use for spirituality, whether you want to use for turning sexual dysfunction into function, or whether you want to use it for what they call the flow and the sexual creativity within your relationship, and most importantly, the relationship to yourself, are the same. And they are very, very simple to begin to put into practice.
So here's the question. Should I go with my partner, if I have a partner, whatever my sexual orientation, to be taught? Or can I go on my own? Can a man, a woman or whatever just attend and learn and then take that with them?
Well, the simple answer to that is yes, because a lot of the stuff that we do in the workshops, for example, would be working with ourselves. And that's regardless of how old we are. That's regardless of our gender identity and regardless of our sexual orientation. And we then move to couples connection, couples intimacy exercises, which is a large part of what I actually teach as well. So we have the intimate connection to our bodies, which is Tantra. And we have then taking that out to form an intimate connection with our partner.
So ideal to go along alone initially.
Yes.
And then you can bring a partner if you wish. Or can I, learn and then take that with me into a relationship without the other person, being taught?
Yes, you can. Because I say primarily it's a journey into the self. But your partner, when you sort of begin to experience Tantra and begin to experience the openness and the connection and the ability to communicate around what is a beautiful natural act, but around which we're actually a bit frightened of communicating, then 95% of the time the partner begins to respond to what's happening. And they begin to open. There is a quote which says, if you want your lover to become an ecstatic lover, become one yourself. So they will open to what you do.
You mentioned age and orientation there. Who is it for? Because, look, let's call a spade. When you have the joys of young love and you're, much younger in life, surely this is not something you need. Is this something as life progresses, as we age?
Absolutely. I mean, say, one person's joy of young love is hormonally driven sex to another person. But we do confuse, and we do have an attitude in the West that there is only a set age period from which we can be sexual human beings. And that may be considered to be in our childbearing years, for example. After that, then maybe we should just go quietly into senescence. But the oldest person that we have clients with is 86. And they're rediscovering life through Tantra. And it's not about our genitals, okay? Tantra is about being present. So our genital prime, if you ask your listeners, they say, well, men 18, women 40s. That doesn't leave much hope for you if you're past 18, does it? You're falling apart after that.
Isn't that shocking? So 18, that's
the generally accepted things people say for genital prime.
For men?
For men.
And women?
40 for women, they say. You reach your sexual genital peak at that stage. But David Snarch has a different view on this. He's a therapist, and he has a book called Passionate Marriage. And he says that sexual potential is reached at a much later age, your 60s and your 70s and your 80s, because great sexuality, great sex and great lovemaking with your partner is achieved by being able to bring yourself into it, bringing your presence, bringing who you are into all of your lovemaking. And there is not a 17-year-old alive in those circumstances who can keep up with a really aware 60-year-old. So there is hope for us here.
You're giving us all tremendous hope, because there is that thing that, you will hear, that as age, with the onset of age, the intimacy, sex, that closeness disappears or fades.
And that's again due to a limiting view of actually what intimacy is. And if there will be physiological changes. As we age, we go through physiological changes. But intimacy is also about not just the sexual connection, which and sexual intimacy is a lot of the stuff that you like to do, not just penetrative sex, but also about your emotional connection. So your sexuality and your sex becomes more emotionally intimate the more you age. And so, yeah, physically, as a man, maybe your erection is not what it should be, but there are other ways of reframing sex so that it's not about goal orientation. And Tantra teaches that sex is not about reaching an endpoint. And for most of us, we believe it is. We believe it's an orgasm, it's an ejaculation. Tantra says, no, it's not. It's about experiencing everything in the present moment with your partner or on your own, as it happens, without bringing the mind into it, because the mind is one of the big killers.
On your own?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can be... the ideal is to be tantric to yourself. Love yourself completely. As Margot and Anne said herself, the degree with which you can love yourself determines the degree to which you can love another person. So completely being embodied, becoming the sexual being that you want to be, has such benefits, because then not only are you achieving the pleasure you want, but you know your body. You can tell your partner, if you have a partner or if you want a partner, you can tell the partner, hey, this turns me on. This is what I like doing. This is what gives my peak experience. And the partner then responds and opens to that. It's a giving and taking in Tantra. It's not like the sensate touch you see in sex therapists. Sensate touch is where they tell you, close your eyes and your partner, and you just focus on the pleasure and not on your partner. In Tantra, when you focus both on giving and receiving, that is, your partner's part of the experience, they're much more involved, they're much more connected, they're much more intimate to what's happening. And that can be very, very simple. Tantra is so simple. You said before, can you learn it in a day? I can teach you a simple exercise now, which is open your eyes and look at your lover. Just gaze at them and notice the difference. Just notice the difference in intimacy and connection with what's happening.
Mark, intimacy, we touched on it a few moments ago, and its importance in this whole holistic aspect of it. Talk to me about that.
Well, intimacy is actually the glue that binds love relationships together. Okay. It is something that is integral to a marriage or integral to a long-term relationship.
It has to be there.
It has to be there for it to thrive.
If it's not, if it's fallen by the wayside, if it needs replenishment,
well, then that's where Tantra can actually help with that. It's a very, very simple, very effective way of reframing and seeing again, almost with fresh eyes, the person you fell in love with. You can see them just as they are at this moment and just allow that to be an opening to intimacy. an opening to a connection that, because of the way long-term relationships work, because of the way life gets in the way of stuff, that we can lose that connection. It brings it back. It rolls it back, right back to the beginning, and you re-experience the love you had.
Have you seen that? You know, with couples that, you know, have family, they have work issues, they're trying to keep a roof over their heads, all the challenges of life, that, you know, time passes by and this slips, you know,
Yes.
out of the equation.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, say, I work from a clinic in Ashbourne, and the 1 hour for me. And, you know, there's counsellors, there's psychotherapists there as well. I have couples that come to me, and we look at aspects of where we can bring that intimacy back. Because if you're working 2 jobs, if you've got kids, it's one place where that can actually fall down. And it's a place in couples relationships that intimacy is integral. It's in the love relationship, specifically in the love relationship.
And this can be rekindled.
It can be rekindled because it's not really gone away. It's just been buried. It's just been layered with all the stuff that's gone on top.
So a good time is maybe when, you know, people get a bit more space in their lives. Children grow up, they move away. And often we talk about that as a time, empty nesters, where people look at each other again and think, who is that person?
Exactly. And that would be something that people coming out for, say, a day's training with us would actually begin to re-experience, how to create a crucible to begin to re-explore your connection, to re-explore intimacy and sexuality to this person who's almost become a stranger. You may know who they are, but you're only re-experiencing them now that you have more time for yourself.
Is there any rule of thumb regarding intimacy? Having sex, how frequently, how often? Does it differ wildly for couples?
It very much, intimacy, both sexual and its emotional intimacy, the 2 components of it, do vary widely from individual to individual. You know, as the rule of thumb, for example, it is the one who wants the least sex who generally controls how much is going to be received and given. But it depends on working with your communication and your boundaries and establishing a healthy communication so that, okay, if you view sex as penetration and I don't want it tonight, is there something else that I can actually do that will get both our needs fulfilled? So I'm feeling perhaps a bit vulnerable. Could I have my emotional needs fulfilled by hugging? So you begin to work at reframing sex and sexuality in terms not just as endpoint goal, penetration, ejaculation, sleep, snoring. That's it. You know, we're reframing it in terms of the journey, not the destination.
Yeah, but what you've said there is what it is for an awful lot of people, isn't it? Are people missing? Are we missing out?
Yes.
In a general sense.
Yes, and it can be easily recaptured.
And for you, you've come to this. You came to this many years ago. Now you're a full-time practitioner here. What difference has it made to you?
It's made a difference in the way I connect and way I relate. It's allowed me to understand where I was bringing a lot of my own thoughts, a lot of my own baggage into my sexuality, and where I was actually hiding from intimacy. One simple thing being is the fact that I was good at giving orgasms. And I thought that was it. And couldn't understand why people were disaffected. Well, I can give you an orgasm. I said, yeah, but what do you want? What can I do for you? Because then that's a balanced relationship. If one's giving all the time, they're not actually giving of themselves to the partner. The partner doesn't really know who they are. Yeah, they're having the orgasms they may want, but they're not seeing the partner for who they were. So they weren't seeing me for who I am. And yeah, it's a constant challenge because you're rolling back on the stuff that we've developed since childhood and that we've been conditioned to believe is the way it should be done. And it's rolling back on that conditioning.
Now, another aspect to this that interested me is for people who are trying to have a baby, and there are a lot of people struggle to conceive, couples.
Oh, this is something I'm absolutely delighted to be part of. And this is an initiative at the 1 Hour for Me clinic, which is looking at helping people who are undergoing fertility treatment to ease the stress of that treatment. And it's a beautiful holistic approach using counsellors, psychotherapists, yoga teachers, acupuncturists. But in doing some work around that, I suddenly realised that intimacy is absolutely vital for to be maintained when you're undergoing fertility treatment. But it's also one of the things, paradoxically, that is most under threat because of the nature of the treatment, the procedures, the self-esteem issues, the hormonal treatments perhaps, all that affect body image, can actually put strain on an intimate relationship. And looking on the net, it's been acknowledged that this is important. 30% of men, it says, up to 30% of men suffer some form of sexual dysfunction while undergoing repeated rounds of treatment. And their advice is get a book on tantric sex. Well, I'm delighted, I'm actually honoured to be really part of a team here that actually they have a tantra teacher in there who will say, well, okay, guys, you don't need to get a book. We can work with you. We can work with you and actually begin to help you to maintain intimacy. For one of the issues as well is at post-fertility treatment is that many couples report that it's difficult to get the intimacy back. It's almost like the damage has been done. So looking at part of this team to reduce the stress, to feel that intimate connection, because it's also about them knowing that you've got the backs, as well as maintaining an intimate sex life, not just the work sex that may be required for fertility treatment.
Because that can become a mechanical thing.
It becomes mechanical, it becomes an obligation.
With a name to achieving something.
Yeah.
But you see there is an entirely different aspect to this as well. This is very interesting and something I'm sure you're interested in developing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so take this consideration. There are approximately 329 days in a year that you cannot get pregnant. What would you do for intimacy in those days if your total focus is just on conception itself?
Interesting comment here. Interesting topic, says a listener today. I've experienced early chemical-induced menopause at 43 years of age as the result of cancer treatment. So we've had to look at things like intimacy as we have to find a new sexual intimate relationship. I'm a young woman in an older behaving body, but I'm not giving up.
That's brilliant. I mean, say, from the tantric perspective, we have the physical body and we have what we call the energetic body. So we would teach you techniques where you can actually have a peak orgasmic experience just by breathing, without any physical touch whatsoever, and allowing that energy to go through. It's one of my teachers, Barbara Corella. She teaches a technique that's been used by women who've undergone female genital mutilation, who can have no direct genital stimulation and yet can still have a sexual, pleasurable experience.
It's nice to hear from that lady there,
and it's gorgeous to hear that. And it's gorgeous to hear that you've not given up, that you're looking at different ways, because our sex develops as we age. You can be as healthily having sex at 80, 90 as you can at 17. Sex is a beautiful part of who we are. It's part of the human condition.
Let's leave it at that for today, on that lovely finish there. If people want to find out more about you, Mark, and what you do, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can get in touch with me at tantraawakenings.org, so that's www.tantraawakenings.org, or on 083 397 8707.
And we will have that number available off the main number here on LMFM Radio. Mark Sutton, it's been great meeting you today. Best of luck with your work.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.